The Kansas City Chiefs finished the 2024 regular season with a 15-2 record and made the Super Bowl for the fifth time in the last 6 years. Not the playoffs for the fifth time in the last 6 years, but the Super Bowl. And unfortunately for the Chiefs, an absolute juggernaut of a team was there waiting for them in the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles embarrassed them in the Super Bowl as they won with a score of 40-22, and as we all know, the game was never that close in what was already an 18-point loss. Patrick Mahomes finished the Super Bowl with pretty respectable numbers as he threw for 257 yards and 3 touchdowns, but the numbers were accumulated in what was the textbook definition of garbage time. This was a true belt-to-rear-end beating provided by the Philadelphia Eagles, and for the first time since Super Bowl 55, in which the Chiefs were thoroughly beat by the Bucs with a score of 31-9, we ask the question, what's next for the Kansas City Chiefs? And in today's video, we're going to break down what they can realistically do this offseason from a cap management standpoint, who they can bring in, guys they can draft, and a whole lot more. And there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing how the Chiefs have been so successful over the past few years, and aside from just talking about Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Andy Reid. And it's been their ability to draft well, and I mean really well. And when you look at the success the Chiefs have had in the draft really since the 2021 draft, I don't know if we're ever going to see a team have this type of run from a draft standpoint the way the Chiefs did over the past couple of years. Now, I know the Lions have obviously done a tremendous job of rebuilding their football team, and I praise the Lions general manager Brad Holmes quite a bit for the job he has done since taking over as the team's GM, but there is a difference in selecting Penei Sewell at number 7 overall and selecting Aiden Hutchinson at number 2 overall in 2022 than there is selecting Creed Humphrey at pick 63 in 2021, or selecting Leo Chenal at pick 103 in 2022, or even Isaiah Pacheco at pick 251 in 2022 for that matter. Now, I know the Lions have obviously had their fair share of mid to late round guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round in 2021, or even Kirby Joseph in the 3rd round in 2022, but the point is, the Chiefs have drafted extremely well over the past 4 years without having the luxury of having top picks in the draft, and you still have to hit on your draft picks, which the Lions obviously have, and there's a reason they too have been a serious contender over the last few years. This was a compliment to Brett Veach to be able to still hit on draft picks the way the Chiefs have since 2021. And the biggest benefit for any team in the NFL is to be able to have not just one player, but multiple players on rookie contracts while having them play at a Pro Bowl, or even in several cases for the Chiefs, an all-pro level. Corner Trent McDuffie was a first-round pick back in 2022, and I will never understand why he fell all the way to pick 21 back in the 2022 draft, because I thought he was a really solid prospect and a guy who did not have a lot of flaws in his game, and that he was a top 15 player in the class. But he did, and the Chiefs had 2 first-round picks that year, one of course being their own, and the other being from the Dolphins from the Tyreek Hill trade. So the Chiefs did what a great organization does and capitalized on an opportunity and traded up with the Patriots to go get him. 3 years later, McDuffie is a 2-time All-Pro and will soon get paid. But the biggest benefit for the Chiefs here is that Trent McDuffie's cap hit in 2024 was $3.8 million, and this is per Spotrac.com. Pro Bowl guard Trey Smith, who is widely expected to leave in free agency, had a cap hit of $3.4 million, and because Trey fell all the way to pick 226 back in the 2021 draft due to a medical condition, he was extremely underpaid relative to the production he brought to the table each and every Sunday over the last 4 years. Prior to 2024, the most amount of money he made in a year was just under $1.5 million, and that was despite playing at a relatively high level over the past 4 years. Center Creed Humphrey's cap hit was $5.1 million in 2024, and I'm not going to continue to do this with the other guys they drafted back in 2021 and 2022, but to give context for how the numbers added up for the 2024 Chiefs salary cap, the cap hits of Creed Humphrey, Trent McDuffie, Nick Bolton, Trey Smith, George Karlaftis, and even Xavier Worthy and Brian Cook equated to $23.2 million. And when you can pay those players that little compared to what other quarterbacks around the NFL are making, and realize a lot of them are making $50+ million per year, while the players we just mentioned are making a combined $23.2 million in 2024, well, that's why the Chiefs have become a dynasty. But as we know, nothing lasts forever, and all of these guys are going to get paid at some point, and that brings us back to the title of today's video of what is next for the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the biggest things to remember here is to not overreact and act like this franchise is done and that they are starting from rock bottom. Not even close. Patrick Mahomes is just 29 years old. He's already a 3-time champion and multiple-time MVP and multiple-time Super Bowl MVP. They are, in fact, far from done. But the reality of constructing rosters in today's era is this applies to not only the Chiefs, but the Ravens and the Bills, and we've already seen that especially with the Bills, is you're going to have to reconstruct the roster around the quarterback, not just once, but presumably multiple times, assuming Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and anybody else plays into their mid to late 30s, even Jalen Hurts for that matter. They are going to be playing for a long time, and obviously players like Stephon Diggs or Von Miller, in Josh Allen's case, or Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in Patrick Mahomes' case, are not going to play forever. We've seen guys leave the Chiefs already over the past couple of off seasons, whether it was Tyreek Hill a couple of years ago, whether it was L'Jarius Sneed last offseason, and you get the point. More players are going to leave in the coming years, and it's really going to hit Kansas City in a big way this offseason, and especially next offseason, once guys from those magical 2021 and 2022 drafts are due to get paid. The reality is they are not going to be able to pay everyone. Now, they have already signed center Creed Humphrey to a long-term deal, and I think that was a very smart move for Kansas City to pair Patrick Mahomes or Creed Humphrey for a long time. Each player is obviously very good at what they do, and anytime you can have a man in the middle take stress off of Patrick's plate and to be able to call protections and to be able to get everybody set and have one less thing for Patrick Mahomes to worry about is a win for everybody in the Chiefs organization. Now, if you are a Chiefs fan, and if after that loss you decided to look ahead and to potentially see what they're going to be able to do this offseason, specifically from a financial standpoint, you may have read a couple of things that they don't have a lot of cap space and that they're not in a good situation. And I'll be honest, they're not in the best situation in the NFL in terms of cap space, but they are far from the worst cap situation. And that's also the cost of having good players and the cost of winning multiple Super Bowls. At some point, the bill is going to come due, and you are going to have to pay good players. But if you've ever heard the phrase, the salary cap is a myth, I don't think there's a team that applies to more than the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now, Patrick Mahomes is slated to have a $66.3 million cap hit in 2025, which is third most in the NFL, only behind Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson. Why this is beneficial to the Chiefs is pretty clear. Mahomes is under contract through the 2031 season, and they can do whatever they want with that contract. Whenever Patrick signed that big 10-year, $500 million contract, only, and I say only in quotations because if somebody wanted to give me this much money guaranteed, I would gladly accept it, but only about 140 of that was guaranteed. So in terms of being able to push money around and being able to benefit the franchise, the Chiefs can do that really at their will. Now, Patrick will eventually get paid. That's not his concern at the moment, but that $66 million that he is due to get paid, I'll be honest, I would be surprised if he sees anything close to that in 2025. They could save anywhere from 20 to 25 million by moving a couple of $1 million around, and then that would free up a lot of cap space for Kansas City. Now, if there is one player to worry about relative to what they're getting paid based on their production, it is Travis Kelce. He is 35 and he'll be 36 next October, and in the AFC Championship game and Super Bowl combined, he had 6 receptions for 58 yards, and there were times in the Super Bowl where he looked flat out disinterested. That is not good, and when he's due nearly $20 million in 2025 and expected to perform at the level of other elite tight ends, I don't know if you're going to get that for a full 17 games, and we even saw a regression from him in 2024. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he retires. Now, one player I do think the Chiefs are going to lose in free agency is guard Trey Smith. With the amount of money they have committed to the offensive line in Creed Humphrey and Joe Thuney and even Jawan Taylor, I would be pretty surprised if they opt to pay Trey Smith. And the reality is, not just for the Chiefs, but for all 32 teams, everyone sat down and watched the Super Bowl and watched Patrick Mahomes get his rear end kicked. Everybody knows the importance of the offensive line, and more specifically, the interior offensive line. And there's a lot of teams that have a lot of young quarterbacks right now that have the money. The team that I think would pay Trey Smith is the Tennessee Titans. Mike Berganzi and Trey Smith obviously have a relationship given that he was the assistant general manager in Kansas City for years, and another team that makes sense for Trey Smith to go to in free agency is a team like the Bears, who also have money and have a young quarterback in Caleb Williams, who got his rear end kicked several times throughout his rookie year. The Vikings would also make a lot of sense too, as they have a young quarterback in JJ McCarthy, and their interior offensive line struggled in a big way in 2024. The reality is the Chiefs are going to lose several players over the course of this offseason and even even next offseason too for that matter. With guys like Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis needing contracts next offseason, I would be pretty surprised if Trey Smith is back. So the reality is the Chiefs are going to lose guys in free agency, whether it's this offseason, whether it's next offseason, whether it's both. That is the reality of having a great team and having all of those guys on rookie contracts. But remember, this is a part of roster reconstruction, and remember that Patrick Mahomes is only 29 years old, and this will not be the last time in his career that the Chiefs are going to have to go through this. One other big reason I don't think there should be any panic with the Chiefs despite the inevitable roster turnover that's coming is their division is good, but I don't think the Broncos are going to take a step this offseason to the point where they are definitively better than the Chiefs. I fully understand and acknowledge the Broncos nearly beat the Chiefs in Week 10 and lost due to a blocked field goal, and then of course absolutely destroyed the Chiefs backups in Week 18 with a score of 38-0. And I think the Broncos are in a pretty good situation. They have a quarterback who just had a really good rookie year in Bo Nix, who just had 34 total touchdowns, and they made the playoffs for the first time in 9 years. But when it comes hell or high water, who would you trust more in the postseason, especially if the game is in Kansas City? Now, this isn't to say the Chiefs are already 2025 division champions and that there's no point in even playing the games next year, but they are 9-time defending division champions for a reason. That does not happen by accident. I like what the Broncos are building, but I wouldn't choose them to win in a playoff game at Arrowhead, and the same applies for the Los Angeles Chargers. Admittedly, I am a big Justin Herbert fan and have been for quite some time, but Herbert is 0-2 as a starter in the postseason, and to be completely honest, I was willing to dismiss the Jags loss back in 2022 because of who the Chargers head coach was at the time, which of course was Brandon Staley. The Chargers put up 30 points on the road, and in theory, that should have been enough to win a road playoff game. Unfortunately, they lost 31-30, and Staley was eventually fired, which was long overdue. But the only other playoff game Justin Herbert has played was the Texans playoff game a little over a month ago, and we know how that played out. Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions, and they lost by 20 points. Even if you want to say, well, the one interception hit off Will Dissly's hands and gave the Texans prime field position, it does not matter. Justin Herbert threw a pick 6 on a terrible throw intended for Ladd McConkey, and I have a lot of questions right now about the Chargers' future, and a lot of it has to do with Justin Herbert, at least relative to their postseason chances. I think 2 things can be true in the case of Justin Herbert in the Texans playoff game. One, of course, being that he played terrible, and that it would have required a generational defensive performance for the Chargers to win, due in large part to how bad Herbert played, and the other is the Chargers roster was not as talented as other AFC teams, not even close. And again, I go back to the question of who are you going to trust more in a playoff game that would more than likely be played at Arrowhead with the season on the line? And the answer is, of course, the Chiefs. The Chiefs were 2-0 against the Chargers in 2024, and they held them to 27 total points in the games they played. The Raiders have one postseason appearance since 2017, which was back in 2021 when they lost to the Bengals in the wild card round. They have a combined record of 18-33 over the last 3 years, and sure, they beat the Chiefs on Christmas Day in 2023, which was a very low point for the Chiefs in that season, but they responded by winning the Super Bowl. The Raiders recently hired Pete Carroll and are by every definition rebuilding. They are not a talented team, and they have a lot of holes in their roster, and it's going to be at least another year before they can seriously compete. And even if they are a wild card team, because I don't think they're going to win the division anytime soon, I do not see a reality where they go into a Buffalo, Baltimore, or Kansas City and win 3 straight road playoff games. The point is, the Raiders are a long ways away from competing for a division title. From an NFL draft standpoint, I think the Chiefs are actually in a pretty favorable situation, all things considered. They only have 6 draft picks total, but what of course needs to be remembered, despite them getting their rear ends kicked in the Super Bowl, is this is still a very good team, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, and it shouldn't surprise anyone if they went back to the Super Bowl next year. We discussed earlier about Patrick Mahomes restructuring his contract and potentially Jawan Taylor restructuring his contract as well, and I think there's a really good chance that the Chiefs try and bring in somebody like a Ronnie Stanley Stanley or a Cam Robinson and a left tackle this offseason to be a one-year stopgap player, while also bringing in a left tackle in the first round of the NFL draft. At some point within the 2025 draft, there's going to be a run on offensive tackles, and we don't know when, but if you go by the old NFL draft trade chart with the first pick equating to 3,000 points, if you will, and I know this is not an exact science, but just bear with me for a second, the Chiefs' 31st pick and their 66th pick equate to about 860 total points, which is around the 20th overall selection. If you want to add a little bit of a tax because they're going to go up and draft a premium position like offensive tackle and say that's around 22 or 23, be my guest, but the Chiefs are going to be in a position where they can go up and trade for an offensive tackle, whether it's a Kelvin Banks, whether it's a Josh Connerly, maybe Josh Simmons falls due to injury concerns because he tore his ACL during his final year at Ohio State. The Chiefs are not doomed the way some people may think they are from an NFL draft standpoint. They also need help along the interior defensive line as Chris Jones is quietly getting up there in age and he's not going to play forever. I don't think it's unrealistic for the Chiefs to walk out of the 2025 draft with their first two picks being Kelvin Banks from Texas, who would be a good developmental tackle and a guy that you could place behind somebody like Ronnie Stanley rather than have him step out there at left tackle in year one and have him be truly on an island protecting Patrick Mahomes' blindside and potentially have results like we saw this past year and ultimately in the Super Bowl. Kelvin Banks was a unanimous All-American and won the Outland Trophy during his final year at Texas and will be just 21 years old during his entire rookie season. That would be an ideal player for the Chiefs to trade up for and to develop behind a guy like Ronnie Stanley, what will be the one-year stopgap year, while also giving a player like Ronnie Stanley a chance to win a ring. Not that he didn't have one in Baltimore, of course, but the fact that he would be getting an upgrade in pay and also being able to win a ring would be a very lucrative option for Ronnie in free agency. Darius Alexander from Toledo would make a lot of sense for the Chiefs defensive line as Chris Jones is getting up there in age and he's not going to be able to play forever. I really like Alexander's game as I think he's extremely fiery as a pass rusher and he played pretty well in the run game for Toledo during his collegiate career. The Chiefs really need to address the trenches, whether it's in free agency or the draft or both, and they're going to be able to restructure money, so it shouldn't be as much of a problem as some people may think. I can't wait to see what Brett Veach does this offseason, but one thing that I do think needs to be acknowledged is this team is going to look pretty different from where they were a couple of days ago in the Super Bowl to where they are at the start of the 2025 season. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 50% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.